Well, hello, dear friends. It's so lovely to be with you again. I have decided today that I would like to play around with some of the seed packets. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Colleen, and I work in a horticultural environment. I teach adults with special needs how to grow things, and yeah, it's probably a bit more than just horticulture because there are quite a lot of behavioral things that we work on as well and social skills. But as a result of my work, I end up with a lot of empty seed packets, and I've just had in the back of my mind that maybe I can do something with them. So I'm going to start off now by starting to just explain to you the two different types of seed packets that there are. You get these lovely ones that are mostly paper, and they will work very easily with all kinds of mediums on top of them. But you do get other seed packets which have a kind of a shiny, plasticky feel to them, and they probably will accept some of the mediums, but maybe not all of them. So my process now is going to be to open up the seed packets so that I can work on all of the sides, because as they are at the moment, I just find they're just too much a seed packet. I want to change them up a little bit and maybe play with some stamps and things on them as well, and some inks and some stamp pads. So my starting point will be, I'll have some water and a brush. I've got a couple of mediums here to try. I've got gouache, which is opaque watercolor. May or may look great. It might be just a little bit too transparent. I've got acrylic gesso, which I know will work because that's quite a sort of a strong medium. And then I have opaque white, which may or may not block out too much. So let's have a little bit of a play. And I'm first of all going to just get my packets ready so that I've got them all fit to go. Look at this lovely one, rainbow chard. I don't know if you've ever had chard. It's a bit like spinach, but you get it with these lovely stems, and it's absolutely delicious. I used to always grow that in my garden back home in South Africa. For onions, which are always good. Kale, can't say that I find this very digestible, although I think if I ever had to try maybe kale chips or crisps, as you call them here in the UK, that might be a better option for me. But I just don't, yeah, they're just too hard on my stomach. And then these, the Livingston daisies, gosh, we have these just carpets and carpets and carpets of them in springtime up our west coast of the Western Cape province, which is the southernmost part of South Africa, and they come in all different colors, and it's just magnificent when you go to the national parks and you just see, for as far as you can see, you just see carpets of these, all different colors, all the yellows, all the oranges. And French beans, runner beans, sorry, these are. When I first started growing beans with my trainees, and we had the first crops on the vines, as we were watering, I'd pick and say to them, come on, taste it. And they'll go, oh, no, it hasn't been cooked, it hasn't been cooked. And I was saying, yeah, but they're delicious raw, especially when they're nice and young. And so we had great fun trying to persuade them to actually try them. Now, a few years later, they can't wait for them to mature. Okay, so my test piece is going to be this little bit of the seed packet which is torn, and I'm going to try all three mediums out just to see which will work. We'll start off with the gouache, and I'm just going to put a little bit directly onto my brush just to see. So remember, this is opaque watercolor, and let's see how much it actually covers underneath. So that's pretty solid coverage, unless I was to brush it fairly thinly. So that's actually probably quite a nice option to have most of the text kind of pushed to the background, so to speak. Okay, my next one I'm going to try is the opaque acrylic paint. It's a slightly more creamy texture. Also works pretty well. And you can see just by subduing this background, it's going to give me quite a nice space to work on. I just want to get these paints off my brush before I get into the gesso. Alright, so when you've wet your brush, just make sure you dry it on an old cloth or a bit of J-cloth, because any water in your brush will obviously thin down your gesso. We're just going to take a little bit of this and try this out. Okay, so all three of them are going to work well. The opaque white is probably the most opaque, but we'll set that aside to dry so that we can have a look at it later. But I think for now what I'm going to go with is actually the gesso for most of them, and maybe I'll do one or two just with the gouache. Oh, wrong one. Okay, so I'm going to just brush it on randomly, not worrying about brush strokes, because my brush strokes will add texture and interest to whatever I'm going to do on the top. Now my gesso is fairly liquid at this stage. Well, it's a softer consistency than it would normally be because I've just added a little bit of water to it because I found it was getting a bit thick, and that's always okay to do. Right, I'm happy if a little bit of the green sticks out there. If you wanted to lose the brush strokes, what you would do is, and I'll just show you this, is that you would just brush left to right, top to bottom until the paint starts to grip nicely on the paper underneath, and you'll see that your brush strokes fade away. I quite like where the creases are, how the paint is settling into those creases and giving it rather a nice texture, so that will be a good one to watch. Let's try this packet with the Livingston daisies, because this is the one that has that sort of plasticky feel. The colours on here are quite a lot stronger than the other seed packets. The paint is gripping quite nicely. I'm not having any difficulty in getting that to stick. Alright, so I'm going to just continue with this now so that we finish all of the paints.
Lost in the shadows, all alone. Silent tears falling. Heart turned to stone, whispers of love echo in my mind. Faded memories.
Right, so we're ready to make our first piece of ephemera. What I've done is to do a few little tests on one of the stamp packets just to see which of my inks work the best. So I tried the VersaFine Clear in the Nocturne, which is the black, on this little square here. But if you'll notice that this is a pigment ink and they're not waterproof. So if you use something like a vintage photo to just do a bit of blending on top, you will see that the ink blends and bleeds a little bit. It could be to your advantage, but you might not like it at all. So I'm not going to be using this one. I tried my archival ink, which is permanent and it's waterproof, so that means I can use things on top of it. And that was the one over here. So those two are the archival inks. They work well. I tried my walnut stain, which I admit I didn't stamp on a hard surface, but it came up quite light, and I quite like that sort of as another layer to the background, whereas these are much more dominant. And then I tried the vintage photo, which gives me a much crisper image, but still soft and gentle. So now that I've worked out what stamp pads I can actually use on my prepared backgrounds, I've started off by just taking one seed packet, which had the Livingston daisies, like that. And I have put on the background some coffee dyed paper, which looks like that. Just glue that onto the back. I've folded it in half and I've inked around the edges, but I don't want it to be as plain as that. So I'm going to take a textured stamp, and just so that you can see that a little bit better, it's this one over here. Oh, sorry, the acetate always reflects so much, doesn't it? It's that one with the sort of spotty design. And I'm just going to stamp some of this onto the back just to break up the pattern of the flowers. I'm going to use the vintage photo, and I don't mind if it's not terribly even. I'm just going to create a little layer on top of this. Oh, my stamp came off the block. That's not going to work. Try sticking it on the right side, might help, and lining it up. There we go. Yeah, some of these textured stamps are really nice just to have in your stash just for occasions like this when you're just wanting to kind of muddy the waters a little bit. So you'll see here that I'm picking up quite nice imprints on that, which just gives it another layer over that surface. And I'll just change the orientation of this so that I can get a little bit more on. I like the fact that all my markings aren't the same size as well. And I'll do a bit over here. So you'll see now that that's broken up the background quite sufficiently. And then I have cut myself some pieces of coffee dyed paper, just a centimetre small than the measurements of the inside of my book. So I won't bore you with the measurements because yours might all be different. And I'm going to use the daisy side. I wonder, maybe not. I think I'll use this side with my focal point is going to be that little butterfly. So this is a little butterfly that I had stamped, coloured by hand, stuck into a printed label, stuck onto some background paper. You know, one of those things that you do when you're just sitting there idly one day. I've put onto the back of this some double-sided tape, and I'm just going to use the point of my needle just to flick up the edges of this. The cardboard with all its layers, because this is on cardboard, is quite thick, which is why I have chosen to use double-sided tape. The second reason is that this packet of seeds that I chose is one of those ones that is slightly waxy to the touch, and I don't know how well my other glues would hold on there with the weight of this card. So double-sided tape is always quite a good fallback. Alright, so just make sure you peel it all off, and then I will use the side that has got the name of the plant on there. Just going to position that more or less in the middle because this is quite a big image. Press down firmly. If need be, just use your bone folder just to get right down to the corners. And then I'm going to tuck my little pages inside, making sure that I'm fairly equidistant between those two edges. And I have a piece here of jute twine. This is 2-ply, so I'm going to unravel it. So I've just got one because this booklet's not very big, so I don't want a chunky closure. And I think I want the bow on the outside. So I'm just going to eyeball it, take it roughly, what's that, about 1.5 centimeters from the edge. Pull it through. You'll see I've got a nice sharp pointed needle with quite a nice large eye, so that means I'll get through my pages evenly. Just make sure each time that you're lining this up in the inside, because the pages do wiggle around a little bit. Push that through to the outside, and this is just a very simple pamphlet stitch. So I'm going to just tie this into a little knot. I don't want a bow, I don't want anything fussy because this is a gardening kind of a thing. Just going to do that, and let me just quickly grab some scissors. Then I'm just going to snip this off, and because I've done my knot fairly loosely, that gives me the opportunity here to be able to put any other things I want to stick in. It'll give me a bit of space there. So that's the first little piece of ephemera that I've made just using a seed packet. I'm quite happy with that little one. I'm working on the back of that flower seed packet. I've lined this again with some coffee dyed paper. I'm just going to use my blending tool and my vintage photo ink just to muddy up the sides of this, just so that the real whiteness starts to recede a little bit. And we're going to be making a little faux envelope feints, so it's just the front of the envelope with a little postcard on top of it. Be quite nice to use as a journal card maybe. This vintage colour looks really nice because it's almost as if it was a sort of an earthy soil kind of colour. I want to accentuate this a little bit more, so I'm going to just use a little finger dauber, and I'm going to try and pick up these little lines on the side of the package where they were sealed a little bit more. Loving that because it's just adding some texture. And this is just a bit of folded over of the coffee dyed paper. This is going to have stuff stuck on the middle, so we won't worry about that. Right, so I've got a little postcard which I had stamped onto some watercolor paper. This was just an old painting that I'd been messing around with, which didn't turn out. And I've rubbed this down with my bone folder. You want to just make sure that you do rub the edges down nicely of double-sided tape so that it sticks well. This is ideal for a thick weight card because this is 300 GSM, so it is quite substantial. And then I'm just going to eyeball this and pop it more or less in the middle like that. And I'm going to just come in with my blending tool softly over the edge of the postcard just so that it doesn't look too white compared to the background. You can now use a pen and just write an address in here if you wanted to, or you could just leave it. But this will give you another journaling card because you've got a plain background here as well. If you wanted to just kind of lose some of this background border of this postcard, you could take a little stamp, and this one's got a bit of texture, and unlike the other one which was a series of elliptical dots, this one is just spots, very neutral, and you can just stamp this on. It almost looks as though it's been stained. I'll just flip this over so that I've got more ink this side. Yeah, so it looks as though it's had a little bit of foxing on it, which is what happens to papers and things when they get really old. So I'm happy with that piece now. My next seed packet is fairly simple, so I have just taken the kale and I have made two little journaling cards. So again, backed it on coffee dyed paper. All that I'm going to do now is just to ink up the edges here a little bit, and I'm going to do a little bit of stamping on the front. Right, so we're going to do a little bit of stamping, and I think I'm going to use a bit of black now just to show you the difference in that. So again, I'm going to just draw out one of my texture stamps, and that one looks just too much like a house. I think I'll try maybe this one here. And obviously if you haven't got stamps, you could use stencils as well. You could find things around your home. There are quite a lot of things that you can print with. Sometimes you get quite nice silicone pads that have different textures on. And I'm going to use my Distress ink. And the reason why I'm using this particular blank is because I know that the stamp pad is drying out, so the stamped image won't be very, very hard. And I don't want it too sort of strong, and I don't want it to be too orderly. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, so I'm quite liking that. Just do a bit in the middle there. Right, so that's broken that up. Obviously I can go on here and add a little bit of collage if I wanted to, but that will do me for now. And for this side here, I'm just going to do a little bit on one of the edges, I think. So maybe I'll just do this edge and maybe a little bit on the bottom just to frame it. Yep. Right, so I've got now two little journal cards that I can actually use, and I have a third one here where I've rounded the corners. For this one I think I'm going to go back to a really sort of soft spot that I used right in the beginning, which is this one here, because I think that this will do nicely. And I'm going to go back with and do this one in Vintage Photo. You can just put on a bit more. Yeah, to me it almost reads as if you've been in the garden, the hose has splattered your seed packet, a little bit of soil's got on there and it's just left a bit of a stain. That's what this looks like to me. And again, I'm going to use the edge of my ink pad just to round off the corners and give them a bit of definition, grind them up. And then I'm going to use my dauber to pick up the parallel lines where the seal is on the side. So just these ones here. Okay, so now I'm going to make a little pocket. This is the dill seed packet, and it was open when I was actually doing the white with the gesso, but I have glued down the sides again. I've used my little circle punch and only put this in halfway, punched out the little semicircle, which I've then inked and glued down on the edge. So now I'm wanting just to ink up these edges. And I did that because it reads the word, but also it gives me a bit of colour on the inside of the pocket, so I don't have to go and use printed paper or anything to make it look well and good and wholesome. So you'll see I'm just dragging my ink pad over these areas where I've had some gesso and some not. And I'm doing that quite deliberately just so that it has a slightly sort of dirty feel, as if I've had dirty hands while handling the packet. And we'll just ink up the back quickly. Quite like using the side of the stamp pad because I can get quite a sharp edge there, but if I angle it at almost 45 degrees then I pick up a little bit more. And I'm just going to drag over these areas here where it's been a bit hit and miss with the paint. Perfect. Right, so if I have a look at what I've got here in terms of little journal cards and things, these will fit nicely into my little pocket. And I think we just need a focal point for that, and I quite like butterflies and bees for a garden. That's quite autumny. Let's see what else I've got. These ones on at the bottom here, this was a napkin that I got that had all these beautiful butterflies on, and I just glued them onto pieces of card. They're quite snug in here, but they're quite nice just to have as part of a stash. I think I'm going to go with this yellowy one. Right, so let me pop these back in the box. And then, because this is again on quite thick card, I'm going to use double-sided tape to secure that down. I'm just going to ink the edges. There we go. Yeah, I think I'll do double-sided tape. So I must say it's spring here at the moment, and it's been an absolute joy for me because we started off in March with the daffodils, and then come the tulips, and then come some of the beautiful trees and then come the little buttercups and things like that. But I was just saying to a friend in South Africa how lovely the trees are here in the UK, because they all have these magnificent blooms, whereas trees in South Africa do have flowers, but not as many have big flowers like we have here, and they're not as colourful, except for maybe the jacaranda trees, and we have magnolias, and we have camelfoot trees, but yeah, the trees here are just incredible, especially around where I work, because there's just a huge area of farmland and nature reserve that I'm in the midst of. So I can't say my work environment is terrible. It's absolutely magnificent. I've got a lovely view across the Thames River as I have my lunch every day, so I'm very, very blessed. but the trees are stunning. And I found the other day, just by chance, a little patch of dog violets growing under a shaded area that we have, and I think they must have been brought there by the little blue tits that nest in a bird box above. And yeah, I'd never seen them before, but I love them. They remind me of my gran, so I'm very happy to have them in my area. Right, so I've got a nice little pocket here. I could use any of my journaling cards just to slide those in. They will all fit. So there you go. That's a nice little journaling card. There's some spares as well. So next we're going to be working on a double pocket, and for that I'm using a raggedy bit of that bean packet. I'm using a chard packet which I cut into 2 parts, and that will be mounted onto here, and then I'm using the bottom of the chard packet to go on here with a bit of ephemera. So let's stick the first piece down, which is this base piece. Again, I'm just using double-sided tape because it's quick and easy and not messy, and edges have to be down really secure. Oh dear. Never one to have good fingernails either because of working in the soil all the time. They just look a hot mess. Anyway, it is what it is. Should have laid this down a bit differently, I think, but anyway, listen to self. Right, so I'm going to stick this one down first, just so that I've got my base layer down. And what I have around the excess of this, I will trim away at a later stage. Right, the next part I'm going to do is to stick this down. So you'll notice that I've cut out a little semicircle, and again I just used my hole punch and punched halfway through. I've kept this little piece that came out because I'm going to use that on here. With my glue stick, I'm going to stick it down. But for the rest of this, again, I've gone with double-sided tape. And off we go. Once the first bit's up and the next one sticks on top of it, it's so much easier. There we go. What are your favorite crafts and leisure time activities? I'd love to know. I've got so many and so varied, and I often think, oh gosh, I must be abnormal having so many different interests, but I'd love to hear what you do. I paint in watercolors, I like sewing, I like doing patchwork, especially quilts. I don't care much for sewing clothes. And I've done mosaic, I've done decoupage. I taught crafts for, gosh, nearly 30 years, so that was really fun. Started off when I was working with disabled people, and some OTs that were visiting said, oh, could I teach them in the evenings? So we commandeered a space in my garage to do that. And it turned into something much bigger. I ended up having a shop as well. Right, so I've stuck down a little bit of that edging that you get on some of the seed packets just to add a bit of texture, and I'm wanting to position this in the center of that other cut. I know that the shapes aren't the same, and that might bother some of you, but it doesn't bother me. Now I'm going to take this little piece that I cut out, and I'm going to stick it down on there, and you'll see that immediately your eyes will feel happier with the fact that there are 2 shapes there. And I'm doing this just because it has a little bit of a word, and it's quite nice to see the word rather than wondering what it was. So that will give me my little opening, and I hope that your eyes are happier now that you've got a straight line there and more or less straight line there. So I'm going to trim down the edge of this just using my scissors. You could of course use a craft mat and a cutting knife and a metal ruler, or you could use a guillotine. It's entirely up to you. Right, and then we're just going to follow this line across. So without all the extra little bits flapping around in the breeze, I think we've actually got quite a nice piece of ephemera. So the next thing I want to do here is just to put some little brads on, and I've got these teeny little ones here. Just think that it might just be a nice finish, so I'm just going to eyeball it. When you use this like a little pokey tool, or if you're using a needle, make sure your fingers are out the way, because otherwise it will be pretty sore. So I'm just going to push through like that, and I think I'm going to use, I've got these little sort of bronze ones, I think might be quite nice. Yeah, that'll be sufficient. I don't want a really hard color like a black, and the white's going to look too sort of modern almost. Right, so I'll just finish this off quickly. If you battle to find any of these little things, you can find the brads and stuff on many of the online shops, Amazon, Temu, those sort of places. I tend to get this kind of stuff from Temu just because it's cost effective, and I'm not paying a huge amount of money for little things which are inexpensive to manufacture. But when it comes to paints and things, I will pay, because I don't want paints and things to last. But these are just little bits of fun that add a real nice accent to our work. Right, I think that these are just going to do the trick in lifting this up to another level. Let's see how we do. Here we go. That's a nice little piece of ephemera, isn't it? Little pocket. You can put something in there. You could put a little notebook in at the back here. Sorry, pull that out of camera. You could tuck your little notebook in like that, whatever you want to do. So I'm going to stop there, although I do have quite a few pieces of odd bits and pieces like this on my desk. And with these you could do a little mini masterboard if you wanted to. You could use them for collage, or just toss them in the bin. So let's quickly go through what we have done this today so that you can get an overview. So we've made our double little pocket, which has got one pocket there and one there. And we've got our little mini notebook. We've got a little tuck spot here and a journaling card. We've got a pocket with another journaling card. We've made a third journaling card with a flap, and that's quite nice because you can use all sides. And then we've taken this one and made it into a little postcard. You can use that for journaling. And then this was just my test piece. But it is quite fun to have that test piece, so if I wanted to, I could actually even stick that on the back of one of these journaling cards just for fun if I wanted a different kind of a background. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this little bit of fun with a few seed packets has given you some inspiration, especially if you're new, because it's quite hard sometimes thinking, what am I going to make, when you can see that you've got something that would be classed as junk, but you don't know what the next step is. Sending you lots of blessings, and thank you for joining me. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Bye for now.